Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I'm John Swanson. I've worked at SDG for even longer than Julie. And one of the things I do is look after this model we call the urban dynamic model. And I'm going to tell you about a little bit of work we've done to produce an online version of it. The model itself, what is it? Urban Dynamic Model, UDM. It's actually quite a large-scale simulation of how transport interacts with where people live and work, and and what gets built, housing, offices, and so forth. And it's used to, by and large, to test the impacts of fairly large-scale transport investment on urban and regional economies. And it's been in use for actually quite a number of years now. The big current applications we have at the moment, Leeds City Region, they've actually been a really good client for many years. They've had a version for over 10 years now. We have a large model for Transport for the North, which covers the whole of the northern England, 6 major cities and everything between them. There's one in Liverpool City Region. We're just breathing life at the moment into a model of the Southeast, the whole of the Southeast, and we've even got one in Boston, Massachusetts. And it's quite mature in that. And people say, well, how do you know it works? A lot of work has gone into setting up a standardized process and for how we calibrate it and how we validate it. And we've built up an evidence database of empirical evidence that we use to test that when we build a new version of the model, it's behaving sensibly. And there's a lovely picture there, which is on the poster at the back of the room. You can admire later. Now, what we set out to do, well, the full model as I said, it's a fairly substantial thing, and let's just say it's not inexpensive to build one. It typically takes about 4 months' work to build a largish version of this. There was an earlier R&I project a couple of years ago where we developed what we called the UDM Lite, which is a slightly simplified version, and it works. It's quicker and easier to set up. What we decided to attempt here was to see if we could put that model online. Well, why would you want to do that? There are 2 or 3 reasons. One is because when people say, well, what's this urban model, what does it do? Well, I can try and explain it, and we send out leaflets and so on, but it's surely a lot easier if people can actually see it and try it for themselves. The second thing is that, of course, this could be a new product. We use the UDM itself a lot. We could provide the online version as a product for clients. And the third, which is, I guess, the R&I element of it, is, well, is it possible? This is quite a substantial model. Can you put a model like that online and make it useful? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. For those of you who like any technical information, well, it's built using this specialized simulation technique called system dynamics. Funnily enough, the second mention of system dynamics in an evening. But it's a computer simulation technique. And the model was built in some software that is used for system dynamics model called VenSim, and it uses Excel for all its databases. Now, what we did is we took the UDM Lite and used that for the online version, and there's a company in the United States called Forio, which specializes in hosting models of this type. So essentially, we can give them the model, they host it on a server somewhere in the desert in California, I don't know. But we had to write the interface ourselves in JavaScript, and that was done by, don't ask me about JavaScript, but that was done by programmers here. And it's been set up as a kind of game where you set challenges and you can choose policy options, and it's got a whole lot of KPIs, key performance indicators, which show you what the consequences are of the things that you've done. So, now, firstly, if you want to try it, you can. There's the web address for it, and you can go and try it whenever you like. It works best in Chrome. There's a couple of little glitches with some of the graphs in Internet Explorer, but it's fine in Chrome or Firefox. But what I'm going to do is do something very risky and go live. So this is what you'll see if you look at it, if you log on to it. This is some text just explaining what it's about, and down below here you'll see that there's a bit of information about this town and the hinterland, which we've got here, and there's a little it'll pop up with information about each of these zones, and then down below it gives you some information. Essentially, this town is in a bit of a crisis, so there's some information down here explaining what happens if you don't do anything. So this is if you like the baseline run, and it's in slow decline. So that top row is about jobs. It's leaking jobs. It's going to lose employment, and the unemployment rate will go up, but also you're going to lose people, and lots of things pointing in the wrong direction. I think the only one that actually looks like it's going in the right direction is we do lose carbon emissions, CO2 emissions, but it's for all the wrong reasons. It's because there's less economic activity. And then you're invited to try and fix this town. And we've set up 3 challenges. So you can either try to reverse that decline in jobs, accommodate a large increase in housing, or reduce the CO2 further, the CO2 emissions further. This screen is essentially allowing you to set policies for 4 years. There's some instructions on the top, but there's a list here of, we've set it up as basically tick boxes. You can this is which you can switch on. So that the top one is to do with commercial property. Essentially, you can clear old premises more quickly, or you can build more densely in the main area. You can supply more housing. You can encourage people to live in the city centre. There's a thing for retraining. So that takes people from lower skill groups that recognises different levels of skill and essentially shunts them up the skill table, and also increases workforce participation, the number of people who are actually involved in work or looking for work. And then there's a variety of things you can do with transport, parking and the highway capacity, rail, buses, and walk and cycle. Upgrade the routes. Essentially what that does is just knock a few minutes off the generalized walk time. But so if we were to pick a few, we could say, well, we'll build more density in the center. Yep, there we are. And you see up here, there's a little counter. So it costs you something for each one of these things. So that costs us £25. So I've only got 75 units left for the next, for whatever I do next. Basically, this is just to stop people turning everything on all at once. Let's say we'll go for a car-based solution. So we'll reduce the parking charges and increase parking capacity. And that leaves me at 25. Well, let's just go with that. So we run it, and the wheel goes around. So this is now running, as I say, somewhere in Nevada or California. And it pops back. So it's simulated 4 years. And now you get a display here which is telling you how well you're doing. So employment, I can't read it from here. Yeah, it's just over it's gone up by just over 1,000 compared to the baseline. So we've kind of improved. That's not dramatic. You can get little graphs about how well you're doing. That's what would have happened. That's where we've got to. Very little change. That's the target we're trying to hit. And yeah, you can look at different areas in the town. And then we have down here a variety of indicators to do with the unemployment rate, population, public transport use, car mode share, and so on. Even prices, because it's got an index about how attractive these places are to live in. And so it's using that as an indicator of changes in property prices. Yeah, CO2 and the GVA, which is basically a multiplier on jobs. So we've actually got those extra people in work are adding about 61, it's in tiny print, yeah, but about 61 million a year to the GVA produced by the town. And then you could either just leave things as they are, or we can switch back and change the policies. Yes, come on, there we are. So it's now on to year 5 to 8. The next 4 years, it leaves the things we've already been doing switched on. You can keep them going if you like, or just say, well, I've had enough of that, so we'll turn that off and do something different. And well, you get the idea, and so on. And at the end, it'll tell you, yeah, you've hit the target or not. Now, this one of increasing employment is actually quite hard to hit. But we've got 5,000 more jobs, more people in work now than we would have had. That's not too bad. And so on. So, what next? Well, there's technical work going all the time. I think there's quite a lot there that could be done to improve the GIS aspects of this. At the moment, you just get a little pop-up telling you populations and a few other measures in each of the zones. The main model we've now got for those of you who know about the exotic world of WebTag and the department's guidance on how to do appraisal for transport schemes, we've got a unit on the big model, which will do all of this WebTag benefit calculation. So that's going to be incorporated. We're also looking at adding a little more about environmental quality of the environment, basically, how that affects how attractive a place is to live. But this is now something that we're offering as a product. In the end, that's probably the real reason for doing this. You'll see that model we had about 23 zones in it. So the number of zones has to be not too large, essentially, so that it runs quick enough to make it useful online. So we're talking about smaller applications, by and large. The big model, we're usually using hundreds of zones. This is available. You can have this customized for your town or region. The interface on the front, that could all be completely redone. I mean, that's just written by people here in JavaScript. The whole thing can be customized to your local town, city, region. And then you've got shared access. You could share it with other officers and local authorities. You could share it with. You could even consider using it for public consultation if you were really bold. And and I'm pleased to say that just in the last few days, we've won our first commercial application of this. So it's going live commercially too. I don't think I can say yet where it is, but somewhere in the home counties. Thank you.
Hi. Who decides on the credit rating, and whether that should be positive or negative?
Oh, well, in that demonstration, we decided internally. I mean, in practice, if you were using it, we'd talk with the client and figure out. Those credits would be related to actual costs and available budgets.
I think I was just wondering, if the local authority, for instance, are deciding on the credits or the benefits, so reduce parking, increase parking, or whatever, whether they're the best people to decide, because it looks like there's kind of a lot of variables in there. So.
Oh, sorry, no. Yeah, maybe it's a misunderstanding of the word credit. Think of it more as money. And we didn't put a pound sign on it, but it's going to cost you something to implement these things. So it's the constraint on what you could actually afford to do. It's not credit in the sense of social benefits or time savings or anything. No. So it's a budget constraint.